Imagine a young woman, the daughter of a millionaire CEO, unable to walk for years. Doctors, specialists, the best money can buy, they've all tried and failed. Then, a humble farmer steps in, no fancy degree, just a quiet voice saying, "Let me try," and that moment changes everything. She pushed herself, gave it everything she had, until her body gave out. Her father, voice breaking, said, "I've got all the money in the world, but I can't give my daughter her legs back." Lucas Thorne stood in his quiet farm, axe in hand, mid-swing over a log. He paused, letting the tool drop gently to his side. The wind rustled through cedar trees, carrying a name that hit him hard. Ava, out here, surrounded by the hum of cicadas and the scent of fresh earth. Lucas had built a simple life, far from the world he once knew. Years back, he was a rising star in neurology, the youngest ever to snag the National Award for Innovation in Reflex Neurotherapy. His work on tactile neural stimulation was on the verge of major funding. But brilliance couldn't save everyone. Not his sister. One surgery, one mistake, and her last breath broke him. He walked away from it all, labs, awards, everything. He vanished to this farm, where silence replaced ambition. Only one person still remembered who Lucas used to be, Maria Kendall, a nurse who'd studied anatomy with him back in the day. Now, she stood by Ava Sinclair's hospital bed daily, watching a young girl's spirit fade under the weight of broken promises from top doctors. But Maria had seen something else recent. Lucas, helping a limping farm boy cross a hayfield, using nothing but wooden braces he'd carved himself. She didn't say much, just enough to spark a flicker of hope in Ava's grieving father. Jonathan Sinclair, CEO of a massive financial empire, hadn't slept in weeks. He'd pored over Ava's medical files, endless life and neurologists, 6 months of intense therapy, and nothing but whispers that she'd never walk again. But Maria's quiet words about Lucas stirred something in him. So, one foggy morning, a sleek black Mercedes rolled up the gravel path to Lucas's farm. The tires crunched, hesitant, before stopping near a pile of firewood. Jonathan stepped out, his tailored suit and shiny shoes screaming city against the rustic backdrop. Lucas, sweat-soaked and calloused, didn't say a word as the man approached. Jonathan clutched a thick envelope, his hands shaking. "I don't need a doctor," he said, voice soft, almost lost in the breeze. "I need someone who believes when everyone else gives up." Lucas took the envelope, glanced at it, then handed it back, wiping sawdust off his hands. "I'm not a doctor," he said flatly. "I know," Jonathan replied, standing his ground. "But you helped a boy no one believed in. You saw something we all missed." Lucas looked away, jaw tight. "That was different, was it?" Jonathan pulled out a single photo from the envelope and held it out, not begging, but like a man offering his last piece of hope. The photo showed a young girl, blonde, eyes bright, standing on a rocky cliff, laughing into the wind. Her red scarf fluttered, arms spread like wings. She looked alive, fierce. Lucas stared at it, seeing more than a picture, a girl who knew freedom, now trapped by locked knees and silent pain. His grip tightened on his tool pouch, voice barely a whisper. "Let me try." He met Jonathan's eyes, the wind catching his hair. "I'll try it because I believe in miracles, but because I know what it's like to lose everything and have someone still believe in you." He turned toward the barn, where old tools and wood waited in the dim light. Behind him, Jonathan stood frozen, watching the man who'd just become his daughter's last shot disappear into the morning mist. The Sinclair estate was like a Palais marble, grand, but cold as ice. Lucas stepped out of his beat-up pickup, staring at the iron gates and sprawling mansion. It was built to impress, not heal. A nurse met him at the door, her voice soft, eyes tired. "She knows you're coming. She doesn't want to see anyone." Lucas nodded, silent, and followed her through hallways that gleamed with wealth, but echoed with emptiness. Paintings lined the walls. Surfaces sparkled, yet it all felt hollow. They stopped at a heavy door. The nurse hesitated. "She hasn't spoken in 3 months, not to me, not to the doctors, not even her dad." Lucas glanced at the door. "I'm not here to force anything." He turned the knob gently and slipped inside. The room was bright, but still, like time had stopped. Ava sat in a high-backed wheelchair by the window, face turned away, a blanket over her legs. Her golden hair had lost its shine, her shoulders slumped like she'd forgotten how to carry herself. She didn't look at him. Lucas didn't speak. He walked to the table by her bed, pulled a smooth cedar block and a small, whittling knife from his satchel, and set them down. Then, without a word, he left. That night, Ava stared at the wood and knife. She touched the blade, then pulled back. "I don't need toys," she muttered to the empty room. But by morning, they were still there. She hadn't tossed them out. Outside, Lucas worked in the estate's garden, carving driftwood into simple shapes, waves, trees, feathers, each cut slow, deliberate. He never glanced at Ava's window, but she watched from the shadows, silent, every morning and evening. His stillness bugged her, like a puzzle she couldn't solve. Days passed. Ava started scribbling questions on scraps of paper, hiding them from the nurse. "Why do you carve? What's the point?" Lucas never answered with words. Instead, he left drawings, a hand breaking through roots, a bird on a snapped branch. Each one said more than words could. It annoyed her at first, his quiet, his patience, but it also stirred something deep inside, a curiosity, maybe even a spark of life. One night, Ava's body betrayed her. Her chest tightened, muscles twisting in a sudden, violent spasm. She gasped, panicked, as the room spun. The nurse rushed in, fumbling with her phone, shouting for help. But Ava couldn't hear her. Then a steady hand grabbed hers. "Look at me," Lucas said, crouching beside her, voice low but firm. "Breathe in 1, 2, 3, out 4, 5. Her wild eyes locked on his, terrified. But she followed. His calm voice cut through the chaos, pulling her back. The spasms eased, and she slumped forward, trembling, exhausted. For a moment, she rested her head on his shoulder. Her voice, when it came, was faint. How did you know what to do?" Lucas paused, then said softly, "My sister had episodes like that before she passed." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Ava didn't reply, but her hand lingered in his a moment longer before she pulled away. Alone that night, Ava picked up the cedar block. She held it, feeling its weight, its smoothness. For the first time in months, something stirred not in her legs, but in her mind. A memory, a possibility, something beyond pain. Lucas's therapy wasn't about charts or machines. It started with the earth. Each morning, he brought Ava to the garden. The air smelled of grass and damp soil. Her bare feet touched wet blades, her hands brushed warm sand. He placed acorns in her palms, leaves against her cheeks, guiding her fingers along rough oak bark. "This isn't about walking," he said once. "It's about remembering you can still feel." Ava's body resisted. Her hands were weak, her legs numb. But slowly, her senses woke up. She closed her eyes, feeling sun on her skin, smelling cedar, even laughing when a worm wriggled across her palm. Under the oak tree, they practiced small movements, closing her fingers around a stone, then opening them again. It was exhausting, but it was hers. One day, Lucas handed her a piece of wood and a carving knife. "It doesn't have to be perfect," he said. "It just has to be yours." "I've never done this," she muttered. He smiled. "That's why it'd be great." Her hands shook as she carved a leaf, each line taking forever. Near the end, the knife slipped, splitting the leaf in half. "Of course," she snapped, tossing it down. "I ruin everything." Lucas picked it up, running his thumb along the crack. "Cracked wood isn't broken," he said, sitting beside her. He carved a trunk from the split, then branches, and a flower blooming from one. It grew from where it broke. Ava held it, tears pricking her eyes. The crack was still there, but now it was part of something alive. "It's still something?" she asked. Lucas nodded. "Just like you, from then on, carving became their thing." They barely talked, but the silence felt full warm. Ava started feeling tingles in her legs, faint, almost imagined. She hesitated, then told Lucas, "My toes, I felt something." He just nodded. "That's your body remembering." One afternoon, as Ava carved under the shade of the oak tree, she paused, her knife hovering over the wood. "Why do you believe in me so much?" she asked, voice soft but searching. Lucas set his blade down, his eyes distant for a moment. "My sister had a condition," he said quietly. "She didn't make it through surgery. I couldn't save her. But before she passed, she told me, 'I know you didn't give up.' Sometimes that's what people need, someone who stays when they've lost hope." Ava's lips curved into a small, hesitant smile, her first in months. Then came the moment that changed everything. Lucas was pouring tea in the garden when he heard Ava gasp. He spun around to see her frozen, eyes wide, staring at her foot. "Lucas," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "My toe." It moved. They both stared, holding their breath. The second toe on her right foot twitched just once, but it was real. "I did that," she said, voice cracking with wonder. "It was me." She broke into a mix of laughter and sobs, trembling with joy. "You're the first person who didn't look at me like I was already gone," she told him. Lucas took her hand, his eyes full, but he stayed quiet. Words weren't needed. In that tiny movement, there was hope. The next morning, Lucas brought a wooden walking frame to the garden, handcraft, with soft padding and smooth edges he'd shaped with care. "Ready?" he asked. Ava nodded, gripping the frame. Her arms shook, her breath caught, but she pulled herself up. Her feet felt heavy, like anchors, but they touched the ground. It was real. Every day, she practiced. Lucas always nearby, never pushing, just a steady presence. Each day, she stood a little longer. Her muscles started to whisper instead of scream. Her balance began to trust itself again. When she wasn't practicing, Ava painted. Her right hand was still weak, so she used her left. The strokes were messy, but they came from her heart. Sunlight on leaves, the curve of a smile, a tree at dusk. She started writing again, too, filling her old journal with shaky letters. One entry read, "Today I stood for 7 seconds." Lucas didn't say anything, but I saw pride in his eyes. I felt the wind on my face. I didn't feel broken. Bit by bit, she began to speak, first in fragments, then in stories. One afternoon, under the oak tree, Ava held a piece of bark, her fingers tracing its edges. "My mom used to bring me here," she said softly. "This was her favorite spot. She'd read while I danced in the grass." Lucas listened, not with pity, but with quiet understanding. "She died last year," Ava continued, her voice catching. "A stroke, out of nowhere. We didn't even say goodbye. After that, everything fell apart. When the accident happened, I thought maybe I deserved it." Lucas didn't offer grand advice. He just handed her a piece of wood and carved beside her, their tools clicking softly in the silence. That silence, Ava realized, was safe. She wasn't alone in her grief anymore. Later that week, Ava asked to visit her mother's grave in the garden's corner, her first time since the funeral. She wheeled herself down the winding path, the breeze lifting her hair. Lucas stayed back, giving her space. At the gravestone, Ava placed a small wooden flower she'd carved. Her fingers trembled as she traced her mother's name. "I miss you," she whispered. "I'm trying, Mom. I really am." The sky glowed golden as she sat there, letting the quiet wrap around her like a warm blanket. Days later, Ava was back in the garden, practicing with 2 wooden canes Lucas had made. Her breaths were steady, her gaze focused. Then, slowly, almost impossibly, she let go of the walking frame. Just her canes, just her body. She stood for 3 full seconds. It felt like forever. Unseen, Jonathan Sinclair rounded the corner, phone in hand, distracted by a call. He froze when he saw her daughter, who doctors said would never stand upright, eyes on the horizon. His phone slipped from his hand. "Ava," he whispered. She turned, startled, then smiled awake, but radiant. "I'm getting stronger," she said. Jonathan took a shaky step forward, his voice breaking. "You're standing," she nodded. For 3 seconds, he covered his mouth, tears welling. The man who'd built an empire, faced boardrooms without flinching, now looked at his daughter like he was seeing her for the first time. "You're blooming," he said softly. Ava laughed, breathless but proud. "I think I finally believe I can." It was a private moment, meant to stay quiet in the garden's golden light. Ava took 3 full steps with the frame Lucas built, her face lit with determination. But someone nearby caught it on video. Within a day, it was everywhere. "Ava Sinclair walks again," the caption read. "A farmer helps her defy the odds." The clip exploded online shares, likes, comments by the thousands. A real-life miracle. "Who is this guy?" News outlets jumped in. Headlines screamed, a wooden frame and a whisper, how a recluse changed a millionaire's daughter. Can woodworking heal? The hands that touched the soul. Reporters swarmed the Sinclair estate. Talk shows offered Lucas cash to tell his story. A medical group invited him to speak at a global conference on alternative therapies. He turned them all down. "I didn't heal anyone," he told one persistent reporter. "I helped a young woman believe in her hands again." But his simple words only fueled the frenzy. People wanted answers, science, proof. Then came the backlash. Dr. Leonard Reyes, a top neurologist, wrote a stinging piece, "Emotion isn't medicine. Glorifying untested methods breeds false hope. Compassion can't blur the line with recklessness." The heat turned on the Sinclairs. Meetings grew tense. Lawyers circled, warning of lawsuits, licensing issues, ethical concerns. Ava's name was tossed around like a brand, a liability. In a quiet, heavy meeting, Jonathan faced Lucas. "We're surrounded," he said, voice tight. "Media, lawyers, doctors. This isn't just about Ava anymore. I can't let her become a pawn in a fight against medicine." Lucas nodded, slow and respectful, saying nothing. Ava overheard from the hallway, her name spoken like a problem to fix. Something inside her snapped. That evening, she wheeled into her father's study, eyes blazing. "You're letting them decide again," she said, voice shaking. "Just like after the accident. You never asked what I wanted in it then." "Not now." Jonathan looked at her, heart sinking. "Ava," she wheeled away before he could finish. A press conference was set to calm the storm, held at the city's medical center, packed with reporters and skeptical experts. Lucas sat in the back, head low, hands folded, looking tired but calm in a sea of suits. Jonathan took the podium. "Thank you for coming," he began. "This journey has been unexpected." A reporter cut in sharp. "Mr. Thorne, you have no medical license, no certifications. You worked with a minor without oversight. Do you get the implications?" Silence gripped the room. Another reporter piled on. "Are you selling a dream without science?" Lucas lifted his eyes, steady but not angry. Before he could speak, the doors burst open. Gasps spread as Ava rolled down the aisle, her wheelchair cutting through the tension. She stopped at the stage. "Enough," she said, voice clear, eyes fierce. "That man," she pointed at Lucas, "didn't ask to treat me. I asked him not for a cure, but for someone to see me as a person, not a case, not a statistic." She paused, her voice trembling with emotion. "When every doctor told me what I couldn't do, he asked one question: do you want to keep going? That saved my life." The room went silent. Slowly, Jonathan stood, tears in his eyes, and started clapping. One by one, others joined. Cameras lowered, pens stopped. It wasn't about headlines anymore, it was about a girl who'd found her voice and a man who never needed to raise his to change everything. Lucas met Ava's gaze across the room. In that look was gratitude, pride, and something deeper, a truth that didn't need defending. The press conference faded, but the world didn't stop buzzing. Opinions flew, invitations poured in, and the criticism never let up. Lucas, who never chased the spotlight, felt the weight of it all, not for himself, but for Ava. Her name was now tangled in a storm that had little to do with her healing, and it scared him. So, one quiet morning, he packed his tools, left a folded letter on Ava's windowsill, and walked down the gravel path away from the Sinclair estate. No goodbyes, no fanfare asked him, and the silence he knew best. When Ava woke, he was gone. She didn't cry at first. She just stared at the oak tree where they used to sit every morning. The garden, once her safe haven, now felt empty, like a house with no warmth. She stopped eating, stopped talking, her light fading again. Her father watched helpless as her spark dimmed. At night, the big, cold mansion seemed to swallow her whole. She tossed and turned, unable to sleep. One morning, Ava wheeled herself to Lucas's old workshop. Dust was settling, but his shelf still held the wooden pieces he'd left behind: a tiny bird, a spiral, a cracked heart carved back together. She touched each one, her fingers lingering on a small pine block. Carved into it were 5 words: every scar is a seed. Her breath hitched, hands shaking. She took the block to her room and set it on the windowsill. Then, without calling for help, she pulled herself from bed, slipped her feet into her braces, gripped her walking frame, and headed to the garden. Step by stubborn step, she crossed the grass until her legs gave out. She collapsed, palms scraping the stone path, pain shooting up her spine. She bit her lip to keep from screaming. Her father's footsteps rushed toward her, his face pale with panic. "I'm fine," she whispered, pushing him away. "Ava, no," she cut him off, voice breaking. "You don't get to speak for me." "Not this time." Tears streamed down her face. "I don't want to lose him, Dad. He's the only one who saw me as more than a girl in a chair." Jonathan's hands shook as he helped her sit up. "Then we'll bring him back," he said softly. A few days later, a new sign appeared at the Sinclair estate's gate, not fancy brass or glass, but raw wood, carved with the words, "I still need my farmer." Lucas saw it before anything else. He'd been living in a small cabin near the woods, keeping to himself, avoiding news, avoiding hope. But that crooked, imperfect sign stopped him cold. He stood there, staring, until the gate opened. Ava was there, standing, not steady, but standing, gripping the wooden canes he'd made. Her legs quivered, but her eyes held firm. She smiled, full and true. "You forgot to finish a piece," she said, nodding at the sign. Lucas stepped closer, and she reached for his hand. "It was never about healing," she whispered. "It was about learning to live again." He pulled her into a gentle hug, steadying her trembling frame. For the first time in years, Ava felt whole, not fixed, not cured, but alive. The world moved on, but Ava was just getting started. Each morning, she woke before dawn, stretching limbs that still ached but felt like hers. She walked the garden path with her frame, the cane tips tapping a steady rhythm of grit and determination. Laughter soon filled the garden. Kids in mismatched wheelchairs and walkers gathered in a sunny corner, Ava kneeling beside them, sometimes shaky, but always smiling. Her workshop, once a quiet space for healing, became a lively classroom. She taught them to carve, not perfectly, but with meaning. "Not every line has to be straight," she told a boy missing 3 fingers. "Every cut tells your story." Lucas watched from a distance, hands folded, face soft with pride. He spent his days across town, partnering with a small rehab hospital to build something he'd once only dreamed of. He called it the Grovier Sensory Garden of wood, stone, and soil. No high-tech gadgets, just benches carved with purpose, paths meant for bare feet, railings shaped like branches. It was a place for patients to reconnect not just with therapy, but with their senses, the earth themselves. At night, Lucas returned to the Sinclair estate, where he and Ava lived in the old gardener's cottage, cozy, quiet, filled with books, carvings, and half-drunk cups of tea. They'd sit on the porch, fireflies flickering, the wind whispering through the trees. One evening, as the sky turned deep blue, Ava leaned her head on Lucas's shoulder. She was quiet for a while, then said softly, "No one believed I'd walk again." Lucas's arm tightened around her. She turned to him, tears shining. "Except you." His voice was rough with emotion. "It wasn't that I believed in you," he whispered. "I saw something even you were too scared to see." Ava closed her eyes, letting the moment sink in. No reporters, no cameras, just the wind, the crickets, and a girl who thought her story was over, with the man who helped her turn the page. A year later, the garden looked different because Ava walked through it. She didn't always need the frame anymore. Her steps were slow and even, but they were hers. Each one carried the weight of 1,000 doubts, pains, and victories. She'd moved into a small wooden house by Lucas's workshop, where the air smelled of cedar and chisels hummed. There, she crafted frames, sculptures, and tokens for the kids in her classes. Her hands, once weak, now moved with purpose. On a warm spring day, the Sinclairs gathered for a picnic under the old oak tree, the same spot where Ava had fallen, cried, and stood for the first time. The garden bloomed, laughter floating between flower beds. Ava wore a simple dress, her hair tied with the red scarf from that old photo Lucas first saw. Jonathan sat under the tree, watching her with a peace he hadn't felt in years. Lucas tended the grill, his hands steady as always. Nearby, his young niece, Ella, played with wildflowers, twirling in the sunlight. Ella skipped over to Ava, grinning. "Uncle Lucas said to give you this," she said, opening her small hand. It was a ring, delicate, carved from polished bark with a silver thread. Inside, etched into the wood, were the words, "Hope grows here." Ava's breath caught, lips parting. Before she could speak, Lucas walked over and knelt on one knee. "I didn't make this to heal you," he said, voice thick. "You were never broken. You're not what I fixed, you're what brought me back to life. Will you marry me, Ava?" Tears mixed with laughter as she nodded. "You're not late," she whispered, voice shaking. "You came just in time to walk this path with me." Behind them, Jonathan stood with a glass of lemonade, eyes glistening. He looked skyward, smiling softly. "She found someone who sees her," he murmured, as if to the breeze. "You can rest now, love. Our girl's gonna be fine." In the golden afternoon light, surrounded by laughter, wood shavings, and wildflowers, a chapter closer knit with applause, but with two hearts choosing each other, one step at a time. In a world that races past quiet miracles, sometimes all it takes is one whisper, one hand reaching out, one person who believes when everyone else walks away. Ava didn't just learn to walk, she learned to live, to love, to rise from her own ashes. And Lucas, he didn't just help her heal, rediscovered himself along the way. Because healing doesn't always happen in sterile hospitals. Sometimes it grows in gardens, in carved wood, in shared silence, in the courage to try one more time. If this story hit you right in the heart, if it reminded you that resilience can be quiet and love can be crafted by hand, then hit that subscribe button for soul-stirring story. We're here to share tales that don't just entertain, they heal, they inspire, and they stick with you long after the screen goes dark. Until next time, keep believing in second chances. Subscribe now and let your soul be stirred.